So kind of a bird's eye view of where I'm at right now. When we look at routine, we had an idea of layout. I just realized layout is a list of furniture. And so I'm kind of getting rid of the class I call it layout. Don't really need it. Just have this list of furniture. And that'll be the layout. As far as groups are concerned, we have the list of groups, and it's just basically a description of what the group is, list of students, list of roles, and maybe the color of the group to kind of distinguish it. When you look at the group role, pretty basic. It's just the title of the role and maybe a description of the role. So you might have facilitator, keeps groups on task, secretary writes the groups, whatever. Really, really simple. And then we have, which affects the groups, but it's not necessarily part of the group, is the group rationale for that routine. And the rationale, again, like we talked about, there may be some strategy, has a list of constraints and a description. So that being said, we're probably moving on to station and kind of thinking what a station is. So, what we know a station is like an area. So just like the furniture, it needs dimensions, right? So we'll just call it dimensions maybe. And dimensions X, Y, width, height. All right, it definitely has color to distinguish it between the different areas on there. And maybe it also has an image URL, depending on what you're trying to do with that station. Like if you're doing flexible seating and you have a seating area you want the kids to associate with that. Definitely it has a list of groups, right? Because when I'm thinking about stations and the whole flexible seating area, I'm thinking like, okay, we have our arts and crafts, we have our computers, we have our library, and we may have like 15 minutes for each group to be there. So we can have a station, and that station will have a group associated, and maybe even more than one group. Maybe this is the reading station, and I have the pandas and the orcas sitting at that station. So station will take a list of groups that will just have saying groups. For the most part, you would only have one group at a time, but you might have more than one group, especially when you're thinking about author's chair. An author's chair is basically you have two stations, right? You have the group of listeners and you have the group of author. And those groups are limited to one person. And that could still help in the rotation. Because rotation, which is the next thing we're going to be talking about, has a direct effect on the station. So each stations the rotation is nothing but a list of stations, and managing the stations with the time effect. What else would a station have? So, stations also have in processing and out processing procedures, inbound procedures and outbound procedures. But since routine has procedures, I'm wondering if that's a little necessary or redundant. And just to err on the side of redundancy, I'll call it procedures there. And I'll have a list of procedures. I think as far as stations are concerned, this is pretty much it. You don't necessarily need rotations on a station. like you do it new with furniture because it's just a designated area within the classroom. And I think that's all we have for station. Mhm. Okay, so now we have our high level view and we're looking at a routine, and in this case we've created stations, which is basically a location in the room for learning. And now we need an idea of rotation. That means groups going from one station to the next. And when you look at a rotation here, rotations are going to have basically a duration. How long do you spend at that particular station? And then transition, which is the time between stations, like going from one station to the next. You might have an idea of a path, like you want students to follow along this path. For example, when you're doing gallery walks, you're like, okay, we're going to go in this direction, so maybe we'll have like image icons of arrows. And so that path is also going to need to be aware of its dimensions. So something with dimensions in it and some kind of arrow function. And then we'll have rounds. And what do we mean by rounds? Well, if you look at this class over here, a round is just the state of the room at that time. So there'll be a list that maps station to the group at the station. And that's basically all a round is. And you'll have, on your rotation, you'll have round 1, round 2, round 3, and however many rounds you want on that. And I think that's good enough for rotation. Pretty complicated data structure here. A list of maps where you have the station and a list of groups, because more than one group can be at that station at the time. Very interesting data structure. First time I'm encountering it, but I'm sure like most people do that. All right. Now we just look at procedures.